Hello and welcome back to the F2 show. This is it then, the start of the final doubleheader of the season. It's shaping up to be a thrilling end to the championship, and there are stories everywhere you look at the moment. Joining me to dissect it all, we have Inside F2 writer Lawrence Griffin, Inside F2 editor Hannah Pruffock, and GP Grandstands Jim Kimberley. Coming up on the show then, Formula 2 visits a new track this weekend. We take a look at what to expect from the new Jeddah circuit. There are a few driver changes for this weekend. We take a look at Formula 2's newest recruits. And we have a small matter of a championship battle going into the penultimate round of the season. We take a look at the possible outcomes and permutations. All of that to come then. But before we do, Lawrence, we've waited a while since the last round. Looking forward to seeing the cars back on track.
Yeah, definitely. I've almost forgot what they look like. It'll be good. It'll be good to see them again. It has been a really long break again, which we've spoken a lot about this season. But yeah, it'll be nice just to be reminded of what we love to see, which is, F2 cars going absolutely full throttle and exciting at a brand new track as well. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this weekend.
Yeah, we won't go into the calendar too much because we've spoken about it a lot this season. But Hannah, obviously, it has been another big gap. This feels like the biggest gap, doesn't it? This feels like that it's been a while since we've been on track, isn't it?
Oh, completely. It feels almost like two different seasons, weirdly enough. I think that 9-week break, I mean, not raced since Sochi. Could you imagine Formula One having the same amount of gaps? It'll be interesting to see how it's impacted the drivers in terms of the ones that were turning, kind of their motivation going into the final two rounds, as well as the new ones entering. But the mad thing is there's a quarter of the season still left, but we all pretty much feel like it's the home run at this point.
It's crazy, isn't it? And Jim, that's what I was going to ask you. It is a quarter of the season still left. There's a lot of points up for grabs. There's still a lot to play for, isn't there?
Yeah, everything to play for. Piastri looks like he's going to run away with the title, but it just needs one DNF, one poor qualifying, and it could really close up, which in a kind of sadistic way, I really want that to happen. And I think Piastri deserves the championship at this point, but I would love to go into the final race like we've got with Max and Lewis in Formula One, with just a couple of points separating them and anything to play for, anyone to win. And potentially, I'm looking down the championship now, so it'll be like Tictum to go out in a blaze of glory. It'd be amazing to see.
Let's take a look at the championship standings heading into this weekend then. Oscar Piastri is in the best seat in the house. As we've just said, he goes into the final round of the season with a 36-point lead over his nearest rival, Guan Yu Zhou. The battle for second place is well and truly on, just 13 points separating Zhou, Schwartzman and Dan Ticktum, who probably have an eye on the title still. And the team standings, Kramer have a massive 88-point lead at the top. Carlin jumps above UNI Virtuosi into second place in the standings last time out. UNI had a tough weekend in Sochi. They'll be hoping for a stronger weekend. High Tech and ART round out the top 5. 36 points in it then. Oscar Piastri has obviously won the last 2 feature races. He does, of course, have the momentum on his side now, doesn't he, Lawrence? Is it his to lose?
Yeah, I think so. It has been 10 weeks since that last feature race win, so I don't know how much momentum you can have after such a gap. But saying that, he has performed well previously after similarly large gaps, I think, between Silverstone and Monza as well. He won the feature race in Monza, so there's no real reason to doubt him this weekend. I think he's proved his class throughout this season and throughout last season in Formula 3 as well. I think, like Jim alludes to, only an incident really can stop him now. I can't see him having the sort of drop off in performance that he would need that would really put the title in danger. That being said, this is Formula 2. We're going to a brand new track. There'll only be 30 minutes of practice before qualifying. The walls aren't ever too far away from the circuit, so anything really can happen. So we'll have to wait and see. But if you are wanting to put some money down on the race this weekend, the sensible money will be on Piastri all the way.
And Hannah, is this the most important weekend of Oscar Piastri's career? Obviously, I'm sure he's had some important weekends, probably first weekend in Formula 2, obviously won the Formula 3 title last year, so I'm sure going into that round in Mugello was important. But is this the most important so far?
I would say so, given that this is the first time that he could seal a championship at the end of the weekend, even though we have got another round left in Abu Dhabi. His points lead means, I think, if he outscores Joe by, I think it's around 29 points, he'll win the championship with a round to go, which would be pretty impressive. Very few drivers have done it across the seasons in F2 and in GP2. I think for him as well, it's kind of, I don't want to say lit a fire up his butt, but that kind of aspect of that he's not got a seat in F1 for next year. Joe's got the Alfa Romeo seat. He wants to win this and prove that he's the best driver, and this is why he deserves to be on the grid. And for him, going into Jeddah, if he can win that championship, it leaves no question that Formula One and the teams there have made a massive oversight in not promoting him. So I would say this has got to be the most important weekend of his career so far.
And Jim, obviously the chasing pack, there is a bit of a gap, but they're not too far behind, as we've said. If you had to pick one, who's going to be Piastri's biggest threat from now towards the end of to the end of the season?
Oh, one name. It's really difficult to say. Schwartzman, but I think I have a bit of a bias towards him. I do like Robert, and he's the closest when you take out Joe as well. But yeah, I've got to go with Schwartzman. He's got the same machinery. He had a bit of misfortune at the start of the season, and if that same misfortune befalls Mr. Piastri at the end, it could be a bookending part for Prema. In their eyes, it doesn't really matter, I suppose, if they run away with the title, both teams and then the driver. But yeah, I think he's turned a corner. I'm looking at the results. He had those issues at the start of the season, didn't he? Taking his front wing off in his first two rounds. And that had huge consequences of him being way down the order before he fought back in Baku with the win. One feature race win, and he could be right back in it if Piastri has the same misfortune. So I'm going to go with Schwartzman, but it looks like Prema are going to be running away with a title anyway, and depends who of those two runs away with the driver's title.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting, isn't it? So that's the championship then. Let's talk about the track this weekend. A brand new circuit to both Formula One and Formula 2. If you haven't seen the track already, please go and check out our track guide of the new Jeddah circuit. We'll put the link in the comment section down below. It's high speed, it's fast, it's flowing. I think the drivers are going to love it. What are our initial thoughts on the circuit, Lawrence?
Yeah, but it's certainly very fast flowing, as you and Luke covered in that track guide. I think the first sector particularly looks really tricky. It's almost like Mexico's middle sector in a way, that if you get the first corner in that sequence wrong, you're going to be way offline. And with most of the corners on this track, with such long straights afterwards, if you get one of those slightly wrong, you'll be paying for that the whole way down the straight, losing time as the other cars have accelerated quicker. And then equally, you have some really long, wide turns, like turn 13, I think it is, which has a bit of banking. Maybe not as much as we saw in Zandvoort, but we know how the banking can introduce a few different racing lines. I think that will be really interesting to see as the drivers learn the circuit, which way they are most comfortable with driving the cars around some of these corners, and which way ends up being the fastest over the course of the weekend. Mistakes will be punished on this track. There's no doubt about it, especially when it's so high speed. With that short practice session, it will be a real test of who can learn the quickest. So yeah, I'm excited to see this new track in action.
Yeah, it looks mega, doesn't it? It looks really, really good. But as you say, that you probably, mistakes are going to be punished. And obviously, with half an hour of practice, as you've just said, straight into qualifying after that, drivers are going to be pushing the limits. We've got 4 rookies in the field as well who have never driven a Formula 2 car. Do we think there's going to be maybe a high chance of a red flag, maybe 2 in qualifying, Hannah? And does that make getting your lap in early even more important for this weekend?
I'd say so. I think given the amount of rookies, and given that it's not just, it's a street circuit with lots of corners, it's high speed, fast flowing, the banking, 27 corners. I'm not going to lie, if you're giving the drivers a track to learn in 30 minutes, you're probably giving them one of the hardest ones they're going to have in their career so far, because it just could throw up anything. We don't even know what the track surface is going to be like, given that the track's only just coming to completion and things like that. And I think with the red flag situation, I don't see as much of a lull. Normally, you'll have quite a big lull between the first ones and the second ones in qualifying. I've got a feeling you're going to have queues coming out of that pit lane at the start of qualifying, because one red flag, normally with Formula 2, the time will still tick down. whereas in F1, obviously, normally they stop the clock. But then they're going to have a very short window, so they're all going to want to get at least one bank a lap in. And I think you might see one of the two, maybe of the midfield team, someone like maybe MP, trying on a strategy of going, maybe leaving the queue, going in that window and hoping there's not a red flag. But if there is one, God help them, because they're not going to have much time to kind of get a lap in at the end. And I think it's going to be quite difficult and challenging. And it wouldn't surprise me if a few of them got caught out.
Yeah, it could be a really chaotic weekend, couldn't it? In qualifying, in the races as well. It reminds me a little bit of a put Baku and Macau into a blender, mix it together and kind of see what you come up with. It kind of reminds me of that a little bit. Perhaps more of a Formula One question, Jim, than a Formula 2 question. Obviously, we saw the hardest tyre compound last week in Qatar in Formula One. Obviously, there was a few issues there. This track is even faster than what Qatar was in terms of corners. Could we see the tyres, maybe giving up a little bit? And how is that going to impact Formula 2? Does that mean that we could potentially see, a pit stop in the sprint races, for example?
It's going to be we're going into the unknown. I can't say it more frank than that. It was a little bit like that at Losail, that the tyres, it seemed a little bit like the curbs were more at fault than the track potentially. So I don't know if the speeds themselves be an issue, but Pirelli are going to have all sorts of concerns anyway. It's not exactly been a stellar year for them, has it? With the time we're at Baku in Formula One as well, the tyres not doing particularly well. So yeah, it could impact. I think the bigger problem for the drivers, or the bigger consideration for the teams with regards to doing stops in the sprint race, could actually be safety cars, red flags maybe, that tyres or no, drivers are going to be in the barriers repeatedly this weekend. You mentioned yourself there, earlier, that the 4 rookies coming in, never driving a Formula 2 car, of all the places. Consider this, Hannah, you're not a driver, so do you want to go and learn to drive in the middle of London? It's just the worst possible thing to try and learn how to drive a car you've never driven before. It'd be terrifying. So we could see stops, but I don't know if the tyres will be the problem that trigger those stops to happen.
Yeah, let's wait and see. I think it's going to be an exciting weekend on a new circuit. Okay, news broke a few weeks ago that obviously Guan Yu Zhou will be driving in Formula One next season with Alfa Romeo. And I think we're all absolutely buzzing for him, and everyone Inside F2 will send our congratulations to him. It's a great opportunity for him, isn't it, Hannah? Going into Formula One. But could it impact on his motivation? Are these guys too professional to let that happen?
I think it'll impact his motivation, but actually probably make him more motivated to win than he was before, because I think of everyone on the grid now, he has the most to prove. I think obviously we've seen he is an incredibly talented driver, and I wish him all the best in Formula One. But there is an element of how he got there. Was it money, more influence? And I think it bears a lot of similarities to 2019 with Nick De Vries and Nicholas Latifi. Latifi finished second in the championship and came in with the reputation of, he didn't win the Formula 2 championship, therefore did he deserve the seat? And I think for Zhou, he's going to want to come out there and prove, actually, it wasn't the money why I got the seat. It was because I was the best person for the job that they wanted. And I think just as it's on money, devalues his whole season, because if you think he was leading up until Silverstone, he's got 3 wins, 7 podiums, and he's had his best season so far in Formula 2. And I think for him, going into his final 2 weekends, if he can't win the championship, fair enough. Circumstances happen. He has had a little bit of unluckiness across the year, but he needs to take it down to that final title decider. He can't let Piastri clinch it with 1 race to go. He needs to play it right down to the wire. And I'd say he needs, of everyone on that grid, the best Formula 2 weekend he's ever had.
Yeah, he does, doesn't he? It's, you definitely want to go into Formula One being the champion and not having that kind of stigma attached, if you like, which you mentioned. So let's wait and see there. And obviously his title rival and fellow Alpine Academy driver, Oscar Piastri, he had news himself just before the Guan Yu Zhou news broke. He'll be taking up a reserve role for Alpine in 2022. I'm sure he's gutted that obviously it's not a Formula One seat, but it's a good step in the right direction nonetheless, isn't it, Lawrence?
Yeah, it is a good step. Yeah, I think he should be in Formula One, winning F3 last season, being the standout driver in F2 in 2021. That by rights should earn him a Formula One seat, and I don't think there's too many people that would disagree with that. That being said, having links with Alpine still can only be a good thing for him. Who knows how long Alonso will be there for, and if he might have a shot at a seat once Alonso retires, although on the evidence of how the Spaniard's been performing this season, he could be there for some while yet. But yeah, I hope that he can get the most out of the experience of being in the F1 paddock, learning about the team. I think he said best work experience ever, I think he called it, in Qatar. Looking very happy. It was good to see a smile on his face, despite obviously not having the news that he would have hoped for. So I think it would be good for him to get that experience, but I'd like to see him do some kind of racing at the same time. It would be a real shame if by the end of 2022 people forgot just how talented this driver is. So I don't know what motorsport it would necessarily be, but if he can get involved somehow and put himself on show for everyone, I think that would be good. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see what that Alpine development driver role really does for him long term.
Yeah, that's definitely not something you'd want. Is it almost like a Callum Ilott situation where you spend a year out of the Formula Series, if you like, and you then not get forgotten about, but there's other people driving in Formula 2, and that it kind of changes the pecking order a little bit, doesn't it? So let's hope that doesn't happen. Jim, what do we think if, for example, the Alpine Formula 1 car is not a championship contending car next season? Do we think Fernando Alonso will stick around? And do you think that, why can't Piastri be in the car before the end of 2022 if Alonso says, you know what, we're not going to win the championship, that's what I've come back for, this isn't for me?
There's a lot of ifs there with Mr. Alonso. I find it frustrating that he's around, despite his stellar performance in Qatar, that he is essentially preventing drivers like Piastri coming through the ranks. If the car isn't very good next year, or I was going to say, if it's still not very good next year, that's maybe a little bit unfair after recent performances, but if it isn't very good next year, no, I don't think he will stick around. I don't know why. I didn't know why he came back to start with. There's nothing really to prove. And at the time he came back, it was clear to me, at least, that Renault weren't going to be coming back and starting to take the championship straight away. So he might have the multiple year plan, L plan, as the memes are suggesting. And he suggested that he knows something that we don't. And that's great that he could do well next year. But I think every other team on the grid is expecting next year to be the year, isn't it? Red Bull, it's going to be their year. It's going to be Aston Martin's year. It's going to be Mercedes. It's still going to... Everybody has just as much chance of doing as well. So Alonso could be hoping for something that's not going to happen. And if that paves the way for Piastri to come in, yeah, you're right. I still really agree with what you said about Ilott, that up until around now, and hearing that Zhou is going to take the seat, Ilott was still like, oh, he really deserved just a chance to be in Formula One. And 1 year later, it's got to the point where Piastri deserves a chance to be in Formula One, and Nick de Vries deserved a chance to be in Formula One. Like, where does it end? It's every year you're out of that shop window is not going to be beneficial for you. So Ilott's chance is gone. He's never going to drive a Formula One car competitively, unfortunately for him. I just don't think the same fate should go for Piastri, be it in Alpine or elsewhere. There's not many drivers that come in and win F3 and F2 consecutively. Leclerc and Russell have done it, and they're pretty well respected.
Yeah, exactly. I'm gutted for Piastri. I'm gutted for Callum Ilott as well. Because that is, as you say, the world of motorsport moves on very quickly, doesn't it? And if you're not racing, you do get a little bit forgotten about, and hopefully that doesn't happen to Oscar Piastri. But I'm sure it won't. It's been very impressive over the last couple of seasons. Okay, a few other updates for you then. Robert Schwartzman will be joining Haas Formula One team for the young driver test in Abu Dhabi, which is good news for him. It was also announced last week that Dan Ticktum will be joining the Neo Formula E team for the 2021-22 season. So you know what, for that, let's go to our Formula E expert, Hannah Pruffick. Obviously we're going to miss him in Formula 2, but is it a good move for him to Formula E? Were you surprised that he went to Formula E?
I was surprised mainly because I thought he would maybe follow Lundgaard and Isla over to IndyCar. In terms of the closest similarities to Formula One, I would say IndyCar maybe bears more of a resemblance and is a bit more of a petrol head sport. Actually, Formula E is electric, so. But I mean, it didn't work out too badly for Nick de Vries. I mean, he's won the championship last season. For Dan, it's a solid move for him. He's in a world championship now. He'll be in one of the few world championships that are in motorsports. And I think if you're looking for a longevity in motorsport, if you see Formula One as the end goal and the only goal, you've shafted yourself, because ultimately very few drivers will get there. And for him to go over to Formula E, I think it doesn't have the same stigma it used to. I remember when it first started, it was the place that you sent failed Formula One drivers out to pasture or out to retirement. Whereas now it's got a lot of major manufacturers in. Yes, it's kind of going through its own phase, but take them to go to Neo, they're not the best performing team on the grid. They finished last in the team's championship, but he's got a solid team in Oliver Turvey, the McLaren test driver. If they can push that Neo car up and he can prove himself, why can't he get a drive in a top team? Obviously, Mercedes will be leaving, but there's places like Jaguar that you could go to, DS Tech Cheetah, even Porsche. For him, is if you're going to be playing a career move, I would say he's probably got the best option out of them all, because he'll be there on the world stage. Whereas IndyCar, for all its greatness, is the other side of the world. They're going to get dropped off the map, and there won't be a likelihood of ever moving from IndyCar back to F1. Whereas Formula E, there is still that potential. So I'm excited to see what he does. And I'm excited to see what his radios are like, because I feel like he's been a bit outspoken across the seasons, and he should be a bit of a character on the track. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of a no pressure move for Dan, isn't it? He can go to Formula E. He doesn't have the pressure on him, and then see what happens moving forward. So good move for him. From our Formula E expert to our Ralph Boschung expert, Jim Kimberley. Jim, obviously Ralph Boschung announced he'll be a Campos driver for 2022. Good news for him.
Terrific news for him. Terrific news for Formula 2. We had that bit of a tease from him, didn't we? That some news is coming. And even I wasn't really expecting just a re-signing, especially at this point. I expected any of those Formula 2 drives to be announced post Abu Dhabi. So I was surprised. I was expecting IndyCar as well, potentially doing something in GT. So for Formula 2, yeah, a very, very experienced driver who, with Campos and with that, what reminds me of actually is Bottas, how he's performed once he had that 2-year contract with Alpha coming in. That I know I'm in a good place. I know I've got my future sorted. Let me just start getting more pole positions, and the driver with the most pole positions is my teammate. And that's what kind of struck me, that this season is really outperformed, I'd say outperformed the Campos a bit. Still hungry for the podium, which fingers crossed will come at some point, but knowing that he does not have to be chasing how long we're going to do this for, we're going to have a season out and all these things, has made him a better driver, which makes the championship a better championship. So I don't know if it's going to be challenging for the title next year. I don't realistically think so. But he's not going to be sitting at the back twiddling his thumbs. He's going to be there or thereabouts grabbing points. And where's he down the championship? 12th place, 40 points, 4th place, couple of 5th places, loads of 6th places. Like, that's not a bad return. And yeah, I just hope that podium will come to him sooner than later.
Could be the perfect weekend if there's a bit of chaos in front of him for him to sweep it all up and get on the podium. So let's wait and see. And his teammate for the final 2 rounds of the season is going to be Ollie Caldwell from Formula 3, who replaces David Beckman at Campos. Jack Doohan and Clement Novalak replace the outgoing Richard Verschoor and Larim Zendelli for the final 2 rounds at MP. And also American Logan Sargent is in to make his Formula 2 debut at HWA. It's all changed. 4 drivers all graduating from Formula 3. Is that a good move for all of those drivers and for those teams as well, Lawrence?
I think for all the drivers, absolutely. Being in the Formula 2 seat is something that is incredibly sought after. So I don't know why they wouldn't be absolutely delighted with those moves. Particularly MP Motorsport being very busy having those 2 new drivers in with Novalak and Doohan, 2nd and 3rd in the championship last season. So in the Formula 3 Championship, that is. So they certainly deserve Formula 2 seats. But I'm not entirely convinced with the timing, as we've said, with a brand new track this weekend. We don't know the track surface, how it's going to drive. There's so many unknowns that will add into the confusion that is learning a Formula 2 car. So yeah, clearly there are other, financial forces at play here, and that makes a big difference. But yeah, in terms of the tactics for this weekend, perhaps might leave them a bit hampered to this weekend, although it might be interesting to see how quickly they get up to speed with it for the following weekend in Abu Dhabi. As we get down towards the end of the season, it will take some learning. But if they're going to be in Formula 2 seats next season, then it makes a lot of sense for them to have a rare double header to get properly in the groove with the teams, to make those links with the mechanics, and to relearn how the car operates, and then to use that knowledge over winter to prepare properly for next season. We've seen rookies, making championship tilts in their rookie season. And so there's no reason that the likes of a Novalak or a Doohan could do that next season with the sort of talent they have. So I think for them, they will be absolutely delighted with this move. So it'll be really interesting to see how they go and how they fit into the mix with all the other drivers who, of course, they are also going to have to be learning this new circuit. And so who knows, if they manage to keep it, out of the barriers, they might be able to pick up on a few opportunities here and there.
Yeah, it's going to be really, really interesting. Hannah, Jim, quick word on obviously David Beckman, Lirim Zendelli, and Richard Verschoor as well. Obviously, all they've all been in the sport all season long, haven't they? So shame for them, and also obviously Jake Hughes, who steps in for HWA and Sochi. Obviously, not going to be with us for the final round of the season. Shame for them, isn't it?
I'm honestly completely gutted, especially for Richard Verschoor. I think it's kind of embarrassing, the fact that the driver that's 10th in the championship has lost a seat due to finances. And I think it begs the question to the FIA, why aren't they doing more to deal with the spiralling costs of the single-seater series? Because imagine losing more of the top 10 drivers off the F1 grid. It would be rather humiliating. And I think it's frustrating seeing so many talented drivers miss out on these opportunities. But it just comes to show that with Formula 2, you can't fault, in this situation, the teams need the money to survive. You can't really fault MP, and hopefully he can find some funding and be back. Especially David Beckman as well. He's had a pretty solid season and has outperformed the car on many occasions. And I think for them, they just need to hopefully be able to find some financial backing and be back next year. I'll say, if Richard Verschoor's winning Silverstone, if that proved anything, it's that he deserved to be on the F2 grid. And I'm just gutted we won't see him in the final 2 rounds.
Yeah, I echo the sentiments. Not the first time it's happened, even this season. Do you remember that Petikov was here and Nini and all these? It's a bit of a roundabout, the sport, and a real roller coaster for the drivers. So yeah, it's difficult. And I don't know how long they've known for, which I don't know if that softens the blow or not, if they knew well in advance of the press release going out and us finding out, to find out what else they could do instead. They weren't going to win the championship, let's be frank. So it's not going to ruin the championship. It just doubles down what we already knew, that it's a really heartless sport where cash is king. And one of those Formula 3 drivers making the step up, I think, is much less deserving than the others. And I suspect that is really money speaking, especially with the team they drove for this year, because that's not going to be a cheap seat to get and really underperform the car compared to his championship winning teammate. It is what it is. There's drivers in Formula 2 right now who've driven all season who haven't deserved to, and some of them will remain in these final 2 rounds. Well, in particular, Richard Verschoor, a race winner, and should be there, but it's not how it's going to be, unfortunately. And I don't know what will ever stop this from being a problem until costs can be reduced to the point where it is very easy for anybody to get in. But that's a long time away, if ever.
Yeah, it's really frustrating, isn't it? And I think it's definitely something that needs looking at. But there you go. Guys, that's all we have time for today. Lawrence, Hannah, Jim, thank you very much for joining us on the show today. And thank you to you guys at home as well. If you've enjoyed the show, make sure you give it a like. If you're new around here, make sure you subscribe for exclusive interviews, track guides, and of course, more from the F2 show. We preview and review every Formula 2 race weekend. Speaking of which, keep an eye out for next week's review when we review Jeddah. But from me, Fraser Ford, and all of us here at Inside F2, we'll see you next time.